The ballroom doors had not even opened yet, and Julian Reed was already playing the room. He stood near the champagne table with his hand resting on the small of Serena's back, laughing at something a hedge fund manager said. Not because it was funny, but because the hedge fund manager was worth $400 million and laughing was free. That was Julian's gift. He knew exactly what a moment cost and exactly what it bought. Serena looked stunning beside him. White Valentino gown, diamonds at her throat, the kind of composed smile that came from growing up in rooms like this one. She belonged here the way furniture belonged, naturally, without effort. And that had always been the point. "You're doing that thing again," she said quietly, not breaking her smile. "What thing?" "Counting exits." Julian laughed, and this time it was real. "I'm just comfortable." "You're never just comfortable." She wasn't wrong. 3 years of marriage, and Serena still read him better than he liked. But comfort wasn't what Julian had married her for, and they both understood that without saying it. Their relationship was an architecture, beautiful from the outside, engineered on the inside. He reached for another glass of champagne and let his eyes move across the room. Board members, tech founders, 2 senators, a film producer who was rumored to be laundering something but nobody cared because his parties were legendary. This was the Hargrove Gala, the most exclusive charity event of the year, and Julian had spent 18 months engineering an invitation. He had arrived. Completely, finally arrived. Then the doors opened. Not the side doors. The main ones, the tall gilded ones that the event coordinator had told everyone were strictly ceremonial. They swung open like something was being announced, and the noise of the room thinned the way noise does when something interrupts the air. Julian turned. Damian Cole walked in first. That alone was enough to stop the room. Damian Cole did not attend galas. He funded them occasionally from a distance through a representative without fanfare. He was the kind of billionaire who made other billionaires feel like they were still auditioning. 42 years old, built like someone who had stopped caring what he looked like and landed somewhere past handsome into something sharper. He wore a dark suit with no tie, which in this room was practically a statement of war, and he looked at no one, except the woman beside him. She wore a deep burgundy dress, simple in cut but devastating in the way it moved. No excessive jewelry, no performance, just presence, the kind that doesn't ask permission. Her head was slightly tilted toward Damian, as if he'd just said something only she could hear, and she was almost smiling. Julian's champagne glass stopped halfway to his mouth. He knew that almost smile. He had spent 4 years watching it form across a kitchen table, across arguments, across quiet Sunday mornings when she thought he was still asleep. Nia Brooks, standing in the most important room Julian had ever entered, on the arm of the most powerful man in it. "Julian." Serena's voice was low and careful. "Who is that?" "Nobody," he said, but his hand had gone cold around the glass, and Serena noticed. Serena always noticed. Damian guided Nia through the parting crowd with the ease of someone who had never once second-guessed his right to any space. People greeted him, brief, deferential nods, and he acknowledged them the way a mountain acknowledges wind. But then he paused, turned to Nia fully, cupped her face in one hand, and kissed her. Not a greeting, not a peck. A real kiss, slow and deliberate, and the cameras around the room erupted in soft, frantic clicking. Because Damian Cole had never brought a woman to a public event. Not once. Not in 12 years of being one of the most photographed men in the country. And now he was kissing one, in front of everyone, like the room had no ceiling. Julian felt the champagne glass leave his hand before he realized he'd set it down. "Are you all right?" Serena asked. "Fine," he said. "I need some air." He didn't get air. He stood exactly where he was, unable to move, watching Nia pull back from Damian's kiss with that same almost smile. Fuller now, unguarded. While the room buzzed with the kind of electricity that followed something no one had expected, she had not changed. That was the thing destroying him quietly. He had half expected time to have dulled her somehow, the way distance makes things easier to explain away. But she was not dulled. She was sharper, calmer, the nervous energy he remembered from years ago. The way she used to touch her earrings when she was anxious, The way she folded her hands when someone made her feel small. It was gone. Completely gone. He thought about the last time he had seen her. Not the official last time. Not the conversation where he ended things cleanly over dinner at a restaurant he'd chosen because it was public and she was less likely to cry. The real last time. 2 weeks after that dinner, when he'd spotted her outside the building where she used to tutor students on weekends, carrying a bag that looked too heavy, walking alone in the rain. He had been in a car with his colleagues. He'd told the driver to keep going. He'd told himself she would be fine. He'd told himself she was always fine. Julian watched Damien lean close and say something near her ear, and watched Nia tilt her head back with a laugh. A real one, open and unheld, and something in his chest moved in a way he had no language for. Julian. Serena's hand was on his arm now. Firm. You're staring. I know her, he said. It came out before the smarter version of himself could stop it. Serena looked at Nia, then at Julian. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes recalculated. From where? A long time ago. He picked up his glass again. It doesn't matter. But it did. It mattered in the specific, quiet way that things matter when you've spent years not letting yourself think about them. Across the room, Nia's eyes moved, casually, without urgency, and found his. She looked at him the way you look at something you once broke and have since stopped mourning. Not with coldness. Not with anger. Just with a kind of settled recognition that said, I see you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm not anything about you anymore. Then she looked away, and that was worse than any anger he had ever prepared himself for. By the time the dinner service began, Julian had constructed a version of himself that could sit through 3 courses without visibly falling apart. He laughed when Serena laughed. He answered questions about his company's Q3 projections. He complimented the centerpieces. He was present, functional, and completely elsewhere. 3 tables away, Nia sat beside Damien and spoke with people Julian recognized. A tech investor he had emailed twice without response. A foundation director he'd been trying to meet for a year. They were leaning toward her. Not toward Damien. Toward Nia. Listening. He flagged down a passing colleague he vaguely knew. A man named Prescott who knew everyone's business because he had no business of his own worth discussing. The woman with Cole, Julian said, keeping his voice conversational. Do you know her? Prescott's eyes moved to the table and came back with the specific gleam of someone who has been waiting to share information. Nia Brooks. You haven't heard of her. He said it in a way that suggested Julian absolutely should have. She's the one who pulled Cole Industries back from the edge about 4 years ago. He was hemorrhaging money on the Meridian acquisition, the whole thing was about to collapse, and she restructured the communication architecture, rebuilt the stakeholder model from scratch. Nobody knew who she was. Cole kept it quiet, but people in the room say she saved somewhere between $60 and $90 million in potential losses. Julian's fork rested against his plate without moving. She's been consulting for major firms since then, Prescott continued, warming to his subject. Quiet about it, but her name carries weight behind closed doors. And now, apparently, rather more publicly. He smiled at his own observation. Julian said nothing. He was thinking about a specific evening 6 years ago. He and Nia at the kitchen table of their shared apartment, which smelled like old paint and the candle she burned to cover it. She had spread out papers, his papers, the early pitch documents for a startup he was trying to get off the ground, and she had stayed up until 2 in the morning rewriting his stakeholder strategy. He remembered thinking it was sweet. He remembered not using most of it because he was embarrassed to admit she understood things he didn't. He remembered his colleague Patterson looking at a photo of Nia on his phone and saying, with the particular thoughtlessness of someone who has never been hungry, "She's lovely, but she doesn't exactly fit the profile of where you're going. Does she?" And Julian had said nothing. He had said nothing, and then he had gone home and begun the slow, deliberate process of building distance between himself and the woman who had rewritten his pitch documents at 2 in the morning. He set his fork down completely. Across the room, Damien said something to Nia and then stood, buttoning his jacket, excusing himself toward a group of men who immediately straightened when they saw him coming. Nia remained at the table, speaking to the foundation director, and Julian watched his own body stand up before the decision had fully formed. He moved across the room with the careful speed of someone who knows they are making a mistake and intends to make it anyway. She saw him coming with enough time to finish her sentence to the foundation director, to set her glass down, to arrange herself into something composed and unhurried. By the time he reached her, she looked like she had been expecting him. Not dreading, not hoping, just expecting. "Nia," he said. "Julian." His name in her mouth was completely neutral, which was somehow the most precise thing she could have done to him. "You look," he started. "I know," she said simply. Not vain, just accurate. "How are you?" "I'm good. I'm good. I didn't know you'd be here tonight." Nobody did. The faintest edge of amusement. That was rather the point. He searched her face for something to hold on to, some residue of what they had been, and found nothing accessible. It was all there, he could tell, the way you can tell a room existed behind a wall. But she had built the wall carefully, and he had no right to ask her to take it apart. "I heard about your work," he said, "with Coal Industries. I heard what you did." "Did you? Why didn't you?" "I mean, that was around the time. Around the time you left," she said. Not accusatory, just finishing his sentence accurately. "Yes, I needed something to do with the energy." The simplicity of it hit him somewhere below argument. She had taken the thing he'd done to her and built something worth $60 million out of the aftermath, while he had spent the same years marrying for access and laughing at hedge fund managers. "Nia, Julian." Her voice was still calm. "What are you doing over here?" He opened his mouth. The prepared sentence was something about checking in, about being glad she was well, about closure. But what came out was the thing underneath all of it. "I made a mistake. I know I made a mistake. And I know I don't have any right to say that here, tonight, in front of... I know the timing is catastrophically wrong," she offered. "Yes, but I need you to know that I never stopped." "Julian." She said his name the way you say stop. Gently but without negotiation. "You didn't lose me tonight. You didn't even lose me at that dinner." She paused, and when she continued her voice was so steady it felt like architecture. "You lost me the moment you were ashamed of loving me." He had no response. There was no response. Behind him, he was dimly aware of Serena watching from their table. He was aware of Damien returning and stopping at a short distance, reading the moment the way powerful men read rooms, completely and without expression. Nia looked at Julian for one more second. Not with coldness, not even with sadness. With the specific peace of a woman who has already survived the worst of something and come out on the other side of it into open air. Then she turned toward Damien, who offered his hand, and she took it. Julian stood in the center of the most important room he had ever entered and watched Nia Brooks walk away. Damien did not look back. Neither did she. The crowd parted for them the way crowds do for people who have stopped needing permission, and the cameras that followed them out caught something that would be on the front of 3 different publications by morning. Damien Cole's hand holding hers, both of them unhurried, both of them entirely certain. Julian returned to his table. Serena looked at him once. Really looked with the focused clarity of someone removing a final illusion, and then she looked away. She did not say anything. She would say everything later when they were alone, and he would not argue with any of it, because there would be nothing to argue. He had built this life like a business plan. He had optimized for the wrong things, cut the wrong costs, and called it strategy. He reached for his champagne. Tasted like nothing in particular. Across the city, in whatever direction Damien's car had taken them, Nia was breathing easily for the first time in years. Not because of who was beside her, though he mattered, but because she had looked at the choice that had broken her, and it had not broken her again. She had answered it calmly and walked through it and come out the other side with her name intact. For the first time in longer than she could calculate, she felt chosen. Not by a man managing his image, not by a room measuring her worth, but by herself, first, before anyone else had the chance. The gala would talk about it for weeks. Damien Cole and his mystery woman. The kiss at the door. The quiet confrontation nobody quite heard but everyone watched. But what they would write in the captions and the columns and the breathless social posts would only ever be the surface of it. The real story was simpler. A woman had been underestimated by someone who thought that was the same as being harmless. She had not corrected him. She had simply continued becoming herself until the room noticed on its own that if the story stayed with you, you know what to do. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. The next one won't wait.